Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of Real Parables. I'm Devin here with Graham from the La Mesa Church, and today we have a new movie for you guys. And it's not a movie that I had ever seen before. It was a movie from Graham's childhood that
1986, I think is when it
yeah.
came out.
You said this kind of scared you as a kid,
As a
right?
kid, it was the most relatable visualization of the devil. That, like, when I think of the devil, it's
Yeah,
still what I think of to this day.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty like what's the word? Like stereotypical devil.
Yes.
Red, big,
Yeah.
hooves and horns,
Ugly.
ugly.
Yeah.
So we watched Legend,
Mm.
old movie, uh, with kind of like you were mentioning some Christian themes of the devil, but not quite a Christian movie.
No, definitely not Christian. It was written. I thought it was based off of like an old story,
Hmm.
and I'll talk about this in a minute when we do like the
Yeah,
introduction. But it was actually like all written by Ridley Scott.
which is interesting because Ridley Scott has some amazing movies, and
And
this
this
one I did not
this
like.
came out. This was the movie that followed Blade Runner.
uh
Which
Oh, I checked
iconic
the
movie.
dates too. This also came after
Alien,
Aliens,
yes,
so
two iconic movies.
yeah,
Yeah, and this one just kind of got lost.
yeah,
You know,
I guess so.
but this was Real Parables.
Hmm.
So
We If you've never listened to our podcast before, basically what we like to do is watch movies, one of our favorite hobbies, and kind of turning them into parables, which is, I think, as ministers, our brains just kind of do that anyways.
definitely,
But we like to do it for fun and talk about it here on this podcast because we think if Jesus were alive today, the way he would be teaching in parables would be through movies because movies and TV and other terms of pop culture are kind of how we relate to each other now. So I think that's how Jesus would have done it if he were alive today. So
I don't know how much pop culture this one really is.
no, this is a little
Obscure
too old.
culture.
Obscure. I'm sure there's like a cult following of
I'm
this
sure
movie, a
there has to
huge
be.
cult following. Kind of like there's a big cult following for the Tron movies, even though
Yeah,
those aren't super popular,
yeah,
and I'm part of that.
yeah. I was not a fan of Tron.
There's a new movie coming out.
I was just bored when the first one came out because I was little.
Yeah,
I just didn't understand it.
it's kind of a hard one to understand.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't understand the first one until I saw the second one. I was like, oh, that first one makes more sense.
It'd be interesting, especially now with a better understanding of technology.
Hmm.
Because I knew nothing of technology when I mean,
Yeah,
my parents were hippies. We didn't even have a TV in the house.
yeah.
You know, I didn't understand technology. I didn't even know there was such a thing as computers when I was a
Hmm.
kid. I knew about video games, but I'd never played a video game
Yeah.
when
It's
that
like
movie came out.
the circuit boards are like
Yeah,
the universe and the programs are the people.
yeah,
Such a cool concept.
yeah. So I mean, it'd be worth watching again
Yeah,
just because I haven't watched it since I was a kid.
might have to do that as an episode.
We might be able to do both of them as one
Yeah,
episode.
we could definitely do both as
Yeah.
one.
Um,
But that's
but
not what we're doing today.
no,
We're doing
today's
Legend.
today's legend, and I am almost positive you have not seen this movie.
Yeah,
So if you have not seen this movie, and like I
best Tom
said,
Cruise movie by far.
yeah, if you've not seen this movie, there will be spoilers. But
Yes.
maybe what you find out in this podcast is all you need, or maybe it'll pique your interest to watch the whole thing. I think I just recently saw that it is available on Amazon Prime.
Hmm.
I made the silly mistake in actually buying it, so now I have it in my permanent collection. A movie I'll probably never watch again. But anyways, just as kind of a introduction to this movie, you know, I'm a product of the '80s. I was born in 1975. So most of my childhood years were spent in the '80s, and there were a lot of great and weird fantasy movies that came out of the early '80s. There was a movie that I thought was super creepy. We just watched the trailer for it just out of curiosity a
Oh, yeah,
minute ago.
the last
The Last
unicorn.
Unicorn. I remember being really creepy, but it's animated. Um, it's actually ranked one of the best fantasy movies of the '80s, which I don't see how. Maybe it is.
Well, I've heard the name before, but I have no reference to it in
Yeah,
culture. I saw, or we were watching the trailer, and I thought it was funny how it had like some big actors like Jeff Bridges, who's
Yeah.
also in Tron,
Yeah.
and Christopher Lee.
Yeah. So, that was in the, I think that was like 82. Maybe that's why I thought it was creepy, because I was just too young to really get it. And then there's the weirdness that was in Krull. Did you ever see Krull?
No, that's another one I've heard of, but I've
Yeah,
not seen.
it is a very weird fantasy kind of movie.
Dark Crystal kind of falls in the same
Dark
category.
Crystal is in there. And then my favorite fantasy movie outside of Lord of the Rings is Labyrinth, with all the magic dance you can have.
Love David Bowie.
David Bowie everywhere. I can't believe, I'm really having conflicted feelings about them remaking that movie. Because
they're going to remake that movie?
They're trying to remake it.
Well, if they remake it, we have to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I love Labyrinth. We did an episode on the Labyrinth.
Oh, we did, didn't we?
We did an episode on the Labyrinth, and I'm going to have this is one of my favorite childhood movies. It's up there with like Goonies for me. So
really?
So them remaking that is going to be, it'd be like if they remade the Harry Potter movies for you.
That would be kind of crazy.
It'd be kind of tough. And I think they're actually talking about doing that too.
Yeah.
But I don't think really any movie, any of these movies represents the success and the failures of 80s fantasy movies than this movie that is actually a flop. Legend. It was supposed to be big. I mean, this was supposed to be a huge movie. It had Tom Cruise. Came out right after his mega hit Risky Business, which you probably haven't ever seen before.
I haven't seen Risky
But it was Tom Cruise's first big hit as an actor. I think he was like 17 or 18 in that movie. I think he was actually 17 when he filmed it. And there's some like questionable nudity stuff for a minor in that movie. So it kind of got some flack there, but I think it was 18 when he came out. So anyways, it came out right after Risky Business. It was a follow-up, like we said, to Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, which is still an iconic fantasy sci-fi movie today, and right after the one that came before that, which was Alien, which is, I think that won Academy Awards because it was so good.
It is one of the most popular horror. It is like the first sci-fi horror movie.
Yeah. And it still holds up today. Yeah. It's still a great movie.
I own all the Alien movies. They're all great.
Yeah. But Legend, as described by Ridley Scott and IMDb, was conceived as a postmodern fairy tale.
That's really what they described it as? Postmodern?
That's what they describe it as. That's what Ridley Scott describes it as.
Oh.
A postmodern fairy tale. That was in quotes.
Is that before he saw what he made?
And it was generally seen as the film that ended the fantasy genre, all the way up to The Lord of the Rings.
Wow. Because
really between 86 and Lord of the Rings, and I think, was that 2001? Was that when that came out?
I think so. Probably around then, 2001 to 2003.
So there wasn't a whole lot of fantasy movies, at least not big budget, big name fantasy movies being made.
Because all the producers saw that movie and they're like, "Ooh, maybe we should take a break."
Yeah, it's like we can have the best cast, because this not just has Tom Cruise; it also has Tim Curry, who plays the Lord of Darkness, and it has I can't remember her name, Mia something, but she was the girl from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
And then it had some other pretty big names in there from the time. Ridley Scott. It was supposed to be a big movie and it flopped. So
I think the main reason is you saw way too much of Tom Cruise's legs. There's no way to explain it other than you watching this movie, but there's too much of his legs.
Yes. So, and it's just an incredibly weird movie.
It is.
It is just weird. Like, it's not often that we struggle to find stuff.
Yeah.
To talk about in this.
It's a good movie just to like laugh at.
Yeah, of how odd it is.
Yeah.
But it's also trying really hard to be sincere in the telling of the story. Really serious.
Yeah.
About everything that's going on. And in this movie there are fairies and goblins and unicorns and a pantsless Tom Cruise who is some kind of woodland boy.
A wild woodland forest boy.
Yeah, woodland teenager. We don't really understand his origins, but he's respected enough by the fairy people,
Yeah.
and he's pure enough to be able to be around the unicorn, but
Mhm.
not touch it.
Yeah.
And but then a princess is in love with him. So it is genuine. It is generous to say that the plot of this movie is kind of thin.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I thought it was pretty good, but as an adult looking back on it, especially compared to other movies like Lord of the Rings,
Mhm.
the plot is very thin. A princess. This is her name is Mia Sarah. Is the person who was the princess in this. She's named Lily, and she's dating. I think she's dating in the beginning of this movie Jack, who's Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
They're at least
They're
really
kind of
good
courting.
friends. Yeah, they're flirty.
Mhm.
Who's just described in the description as a forest child.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I think that, like, it's just a kid that was raised up in the forest.
yeah,
Is basically because that's what the fairies call them.
yeah.
They're like, "Aren't you a forest boy?"
I kind of relate him to being like Mowgli of
Yeah.
Jungle Book. Maybe he was raised by animals
Yeah.
or by the fairies or just whatever creatures are out there, because kind of
Yeah.
took care of him. Um, and we never find out why he's living in the forest. Like I said, we don't know how he met the princess. But one day, as Jack and Lily are together, Jack tells Lily that the unicorns, the last two unicorns, are going to be visiting the forest that day. So Jack takes Lily to see them. Now, this is a big no-no. He's not supposed to do this, but he trusts her, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Jack trusts Lily that you know he sees that she's a good person, that she's pure, that she's trustworthy. So he wants her to see something that's really special. That's like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And she touches one. She doesn't listen to Jack's warnings. She goes out and she's dancing and singing, and she touches this unicorn. And then somehow this allows the goblins, because they couldn't shoot the unicorn
Yeah.
until she touched it for some reason.
Mhm.
That's where the plot gets kind of thin. I don't know how that works. These goblins
I think
are.
she kind of led them to. I think she was a distraction.
Oh, maybe.
They
Yeah,
like the goblins didn't think they had a chance of actually
yeah.
catching one until
She
she
distracted it.
distracted it.
Yeah. So the goblins, they are the minions of um, Tim Curry's character, which is called the Lord of Darkness, and they attack the unicorn. And when they finally shoot it with this arrow, and they chase after it, and they trap it, and then they just cut the horn off. At first I think we think that they have killed it. They just saw
Yeah.
the sword coming down.
Yeah. It seemed a little bit like they
Yeah,
executed
yeah, but I
the
think they
unicorn.
just cut the horn off.
Yeah.
Um,
Just kind of put it in a sleep, I guess, or
yeah,
something.
and because of that action, this once lively, life-filled forest goes into winter
Hmm.
because the unicorns represent warmth and love and life.
Yeah.
So now that the stallion, has had its horn cut off,
There's no
um,
day and night.
they're in eternal winter now.
Not yet.
Yeah,
The second one would be winter.
well, that's eternal darkness. This
Oh,
is just eternal winter.
eternal winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but then the other one needs to be killed too, so
Yeah.
that the eternal darkness can happen.
Yeah.
Um, so at this point, Jack and Lily get separated, and they are both trying to fix this mess that they've created on their own. And Jack has help from a bunch of fairies who are kind of jerks.
Yeah.
They're not.
They're like playing in riddles to
Yeah,
test him before they can
yeah,
actually trust him. Which I don't know why. You're both trying to fight the same guy.
yeah. Well, and you're trying to fight the same guy, and they know that he's the only one who can actually fix this.
Yeah.
But whenever he actually needs help, they're not really around.
It would. When they first showed up, it felt very like Children of the Corn, like they
Yeah.
were about to just murder Jack.
Yeah, and then around the same time, Lily, who's supposed to be watching the mare because she's the
Yeah.
last one, she and the unicorn end up getting kidnapped by darkness's minions, and given them kind of a gets kind of weird from that point on in their story.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. And she doesn't entirely succumb to that what the Lord of Darkness is trying to get her to do, but um, she definitely goes through some real temptation.
Yeah.
But eventually, they, her and Jack and the fairies, they defeat darkness, kind of. I think.
I think they do.
Yeah.
They at least.
They at least free everything from eternal winter.
Yeah.
And the unicorns are brought back.
Yeah. They kind of send them into like this purgatory, which.
Yeah.
Somehow looked like space, but they were still on Earth. I don't know.
It's once again, it's the weird movie.
Yeah.
And the plot's kind of all over the place. I think Ridley Scott was tired after writing Aliens and Blade Runner.
Or the other producers just gave him way too much freedom.
Way too much freedom.
Yeah. You know what? You've put some good stuff out. You kind of do whatever you want.
The studio just like, make whatever you want, man.
Yeah.
You go for it.
And they came out with this like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, I think the budget for this was like, this back in the 80s.
Too much.
It was like $78 million.
Yeah, that's too much.
And I think they made at the box office like $50 million.
Yeah, that's bad.
Which is a huge hit for all this. But anyways, so back to the story. So the Lord of Darkness, played by Tim Curry, we're told in the very beginning of this movie that the Lord of Darkness can only be destroyed by sunlight. But if he can find a way to destroy the light, then he will be able to rule all of creation. So he enlists the goblins to exterminate the source of light and life and love. And the only way to find that source, the only way to find these unicorns, is to find beings that are filled with innocence. So that's how. So yes, they're tracking Jack and Lily down, but I think this is kind of true in the Christian realm, too. Satan, our Lord of Darkness, he cannot bear the light of God, so he tries to destroy Jesus by taking over his innocence, by getting him to sin. So he takes Jesus out into the wilderness for 40 days, and over the course of this 40 days, he's continually trying to get Jesus to stumble and to sin. Because if he can get Jesus to sin, then ultimately he would win. He would have dominion over Jesus, and he'd have dominion over the earth. And I think the same thing happens in our lives. Satan wants us to fail. We want to resist temptation. I think that's at the core of who we are. But Satan wants us to fail so he can rule over us. He wants to take that little area in our life where we mess up. Maybe it's you got angry at a friend at an award show, and you walk up on stage and you smack him. No names, but he wants to take advantage of situations like that.
Yeah.
And look at how ugly things have gotten for the smacker, in this story.
Yeah, he left some fresh prints on some wrong faces.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. He just got jiggy with it. But I think one of the best ways for us to fight darkness is to also know our own weaknesses. So thinking about weaknesses and thinking about temptation, let's talk a little bit about areas that we are most likely tempted. For me, I'll go first since I've had a minute to think about this. For me, I think it is pride. I think I'm very prone. I'm not, there's a lot of things I really am not prideful about, but it's pride in the sense of, I think there's given tasks and responsibilities and things that are out there that nobody's going to do it as good as me, so I'll just do it myself. And I've come to understand that that's not really, I used to equate that to just being a hard worker.
Yeah.
But I think it's not really hard work. I think what it is arrogance and pride. That there are, um, to think that nobody else is going to be able to live up to my standards is a pretty arrogant thing to
Yeah.
believe. So I think, even though if you met me on the street, you wouldn't see me as being an arrogant, prideful person, I think it's a real struggle for me, is that mentality. And then connected with that, I do have um, I have a desire to work hard, which there's nothing wrong with working hard, but I think I also want to be seen as a hard worker, which is a bigger problem. It's one thing
Yeah.
to want to work hard, but it's a different thing to want other people to look at you and say, "Man, he's a hard worker."
Yeah.
I think I struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on it over the past couple of years, and I don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
At least not to my knowledge, anyways. But it is a real area of temptation for me.
I think the temptation that I think I recognize the most in my life currently is this feeling of uh my relationship with God right now is good enough. Like it doesn't need to be worked on at all. It's fine exactly how it is. Kind of like I get too comfortable,
Mm.
and whenever I fall into that, I like end up like just feeling absolutely terrible when I realize, man, I'm really just not really putting my relationship with God as a priority right now, which sucks. So like because I talk to God and I pray to God almost every day, but there's not. There'll go long periods of time where I feel like I don't need to actually like take an hour today to actually just spend time with God. I don't need to do that today, uh, which is just the devil in my ear telling me that.
Yeah.
Because I do need that, and so I'm trying to be better about that, about making designated times where I'm doing that, because that's something I'm terrible at, and I know Satan takes advantage of that. He's like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, you're really bad at time management.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use this to my advantage."
Yeah. Because it's real easy to say, well, I can pray, but do I really need to pray for an hour or
Yeah.
45 minutes or
Or
whatever?
or do I need to go into scripture today? Because scripture is hard for me. I'm much more. I connect to God much more spiritually on on a level of feeling His presence in times of like solitude and quiet. It's not a lot in scripture, so lots of times I just want to avoid scripture. But that's still really important. And I a lot of times when I'm actually diving into scripture, I'm like, man, it's cool to be in your presence, God. Like
Yeah.
reading these words, like it's listening to you, and it's really easy for my head to be like, no, you don't need that.
Yeah. Be interesting to see if any of you would comment on that. Temptations and knowing what your temptations are is a crucial part of our own personal journey.
Yeah.
If we know the areas where we're most likely to be tempted, then we can be proactive in fighting that fight.
And it's okay to admit those
Yeah.
temptations, even if you're still struggling with them.
Yeah.
That's even more reason to talk about
Yeah,
them.
I mean, there's lots of things that I still struggle with,
Yeah.
and um, there's no, this whole era of making people feel guilty because they've messed up is just, I think it needs to end. Because everybody messes up.
Yeah.
Some ways of messing up are just more public than others, and some ways of messing up have more this world consequences. But we all mess up. So whether you're messing up is, you have been saying too many bad words, or you're messing up is you went to a bar and got drunk and drove home. They're both sin in God's eyes. They're both areas of temptation that Satan can use against you, but they're both equally sinful.
Yeah.
And equally forgivable, and equally able to move past those things. So As this movie moves on, you see that there's this weird conversation about unicorns being they're the source of all that is good and pure
Hmm.
and magical, and I think they intermix the use of magical and love in
Yes,
this movie. Um,
love is magical.
they represent not just love, but as they describe in the movie, perfect love.
Hmm.
And as long as they exist, evil will never be able to rule the world. So it's these creatures that the goblins were sent to eliminate. And as the unicorn is, you think in the moment the unicorn's dying. It was this warm sunny day, and then when that horn or it dies, whatever happens, everything turns to ice, and the warmth and the light are gone, and all that was good has now been frozen. Early in the movie, Lily, even though she's a princess, she hangs out with your average everyday person, and she
Hmm.
likes going to the baker and getting fresh sweets and treats from this baker, and she goes running back to this house, and the whole family is frozen solid. Why didn't Jack and Lily get frozen? I don't fully understand that.
Well, Jack was in the water.
Yeah,
Water takes a longer time to cool off than.
but he still had to come out of the water. But it's one of those weaknesses in the plot lines again. But once again, all goodness and purity and love have been, have vanished. And I think the same thing is true in our lives. That um, once we've succumbed to temptation, and I'm not talking about just messing up, but the conscious decision. I know this is wrong,
Hmm.
but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it. Especially if you get to the point where that thing becomes an addiction.
Yeah.
You know, um, I I struggled with some addictions, especially earlier in life. There's a reason why I don't do those things. I mean, I might have a beer occasionally, um, but there's other stuff that I just refuse to do because I just don't want to walk down that road and give that foothold. But
Hmm.
it's really easy to be consumed by whether it's alcohol or drugs or gambling or work.
Yeah.
You can become so consumed by these things that everything good, all that goodness, all the purity, all the love vanish from our lives, and everything kind of becomes cold. There's a common, when you see somebody who's deeply addicted to drugs, you can see this coldness in their lives. I don't know, you might have experience with this a little bit, but you see somebody who's deeply addicted to drugs, and even the appearance of their skin is very gray, and there's no warmth left. Everything is about that one thing.
Hmm.
That's all life is about, is getting more of the crystal meth
Yeah.
or whatever it happens to be, alcohol. And uh, have you ever experienced or witnessed anything like this?
I haven't really ever known anybody that's been like that, but it just makes me think of a lot of the times. I mean, just recently when we were going out to the homeless people handing out care packages, a lot of the people just didn't even want the care packages, which is a lot of like essential stuff,
Mm,
like good stuff like a toothbrush, toothpaste, water,
yeah,
stuff like that, and they don't want any of that because that's not really what they're looking for. They
no,
want money and anything else they can sell
mm,
to fund their
it's
addictions.
hard to sell socks and water.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's just the reality. Is that I don't really think about. I think about like what these people need, and you go out and you try to give it to them, and they don't care about it because they don't care about what they need. They care about what they want.
yeah. They're consumed by the desires,
Yeah,
not by the needs, the essentials.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had several people in my life that were uh, had various addictions. I've seen people with drug slash alcohol addictions, people with sex addictions, people with gambling addictions, and
Mm-hmm.
it is so sad that they're just all consumed by this thing, and it is something that will never be fulfilled. You know, there's no high like the first high.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that, you know, people who are specialists say, you know, that first time you use crystal meth or heroin or whatever it is, and you get really high, you spend the rest of your life chasing that first high, but are incapable of ever having it unless you try something else, which is why you see all these progressions. You know, somebody might start, you know, with what I call the hippie drugs, you know, taking mushrooms or LSD.
Mm-hmm.
But LSD isn't, you know, as effective the second time as it is the first time.
Yeah.
So you move on to something else, it's going to be that same euphoric state. And it just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And then you end up, you know, a heroin addict or a crystal meth addict. And you're just completely and totally consumed. And all life is cold and miserable. And that's because there's no room left for love.
Yeah.
There's no room left for light. There's no room left for happiness. And that's what, you know, the Bible tells us that Jesus came to give us back. You know, he wants to free us from that life of coldness and misery, and he wants to give us back, you know, that light. You know, Jesus
Mm-hmm.
talked a lot about light. He wants to give us back the warmth. He wants to give us back our freedom. He wants to give us ultimately the love that we're all searching for.
Yeah.
Um, so Lily soon overhears that she is the reason that the goblins were able to poison and ultimately capture the stallion unicorn, and she's crushed. You know, she's torn up about um, that this is all her fault. Not just the capture and the, you know, maiming of this unicorn, but this eternal winter is all her fault, and that she's broken creation, and uh, this world is now locked in a season of death, according to Gump. That's what he says. That
Mm-hmm.
because of what she did, all of creation is locked into a season of Gump. Gump. A season of Gump.
Gump.
A season of death.
Best name for a fairy, by the
Yes.
way.
Gump. Gump is a woodland fairy. He's definitely the biggest jerk of all of them in the movie.
Yes. He's one of my least favorite characters.
Yeah, he's so grating on your nerves. But anyways, so
I'm still not I'm still not convinced he's a good guy.
no, he's definitely. I have another word for him, but I'm not going to use it in this podcast. But so she and Jack are on a mission to save the unicorns and get that horn back. And Jack and Lily had broken the rules. They had sinned. They had interacted with this unicorn, and they are the only ones who can fix it. Um, and I think we see this happening, you know, quite frequently in our lives as well. You know, we sin, we make a mess out of things, but oftentimes we, along with the power of God, are the only ones who are able to fix it. You know, I've seen this played out even in my own life. There was a time where I was pretty cold to the world. My life was 100% about work. That's all I cared about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had people that were in my lives, but I really didn't care about them. All I wanted to do is work and make money. That was the only thing that mattered for me. The more hours I could work, the more money I could make, the more money I could put in a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only plan I really had. I didn't have any others, so um, I was addicted to work in my early 20s. And, when I met God in, I think it was 99, it was either late, no, I think it was 98, late 98. When I met God, for the real God, in late 98, I realized how empty all that really was. And I knew that I saw that there was hope out there for something better, but I knew that I was the only one who could really fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I couldn't do it on my own. I had to be with God's help,
Yeah.
but I'm the one who was making the conscious decision to work whenever there was overtime offered. I was the one that was making the decision to work the overtime.
Yeah.
I was the one, even if I wasn't working at the restaurant, I would take, small, day labor jobs,
Hmm.
mowing yards, cutting wood, fixing, little handyman kind of stuff,
Yeah.
for people. Because the only thing that mattered to me was money. And that was all that mattered in my life, was making enough money. And I realized, after this meeting that I had to make a conscious decision to change and allow the Holy Spirit to change me. You have anything similar like that?
The only thing I can think of that really just like kind of think of like that addictiveness you're talking about. Uh, all I could think about in like middle school, high school was video games. Like I didn't really think too much about life in general. What
Yeah.
what I was gonna be expected from me in life. What I was gonna do. I just went to school, went to church, came home, played video games.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes right after church, I'd go over to his house
Yeah.
and play video games. And that's really all I just lived and breathed for probably at least 8 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then right before college, I kind of my parents kind of helped me recognize that it was a problem. I thought about like how much time I really was logging in and playing games, which was it was something I was proud of, was how much I played, how much time I had to play. And then I immediately realized like, wow, this is a big issue. And the moment I sold all my game systems, all my games, and like had that like I have nothing
Mm-hmm.
holding me down, it was this incredible freeing feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt so free. It was like the hand that's causing you to sin, like cutting it off.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a healthy person.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was really holding me back. And uh yeah, there's something really powerful about getting rid of the thing that's holding you
Oh, yeah,
down.
definitely. Yeah, we don't think about it, too often, in terms like that. But there's, because like, how do you cut off work, you know,
Yeah.
or how do you, if you have a food addiction, which there's lots of people that have food, like, not just like weird food addictions, but overeating or
Exactly.
addiction.
It's something you have to do to survive.
Yeah, you have to eat, but how do you break those addictions? But once you do, like, we've been on this fast, for the last
Hmm.
couple months, and um, I was fasting from two things. And I know you're supposed to talk about your fast, but it has a purpose here.
Yeah.
I was fasting uh, from breads, wheat bread specific, like glutens, and I was fasting from sugar. That was the hard one.
Yeah.
Wheat, whatever, I don't care. But I know I probably shouldn't eat it, but it doesn't really make a big
Hmm.
difference. I can still eat it and be fine.
So no cake.
Yeah, no cake. But it's not really a cake as much as candy,
Yes.
because candy is
That's
my
that's my weakness too.
candy is my weakness, and I could do without desserts. Doesn't Not a big deal.
Hmm.
But I realized about 3 or 4 days into it how addicted I was to candy, because every night, I would either have bought something at the grocery store when I was getting dinner stuff for me to have, or I'd ask Gabe to go to 7-Eleven and get me something.
Hmm.
Every day I was having a piece of candy, and um, now that I haven't had candy in my life, I feel so much better. Like, just, you know, sugar causes, like, just physical things. Sugar causes inflammation, and I haven't had any inflammation issues in um, like my wrists or my fingers or hands or anything like that, since I stopped eating candy,
Hmm.
and it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so making that conscious decision that this is something that is needs to be changed, asking God, please help me change this,
Yeah.
and then you doing it is crucial in the Christian walk. So back to the story. Uh, Jack and Lily, in their own ways, have decided they have to be a part of fixing this problem. Jack, with the help of the fairies, the jerk fairies, decide that before he can go battle the Lord of Darkness,
Mm-hmm.
that they say in this that he needs to have some special armor and weapons to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't have a whole lot to talk about there from the movie standpoint, but there's some very clear things from the Bible that talk about this armor and weapons.
Yeah. So in Ephesians 6:10-17, uh, it's the scripture where it talks a lot about the armor of God. And Paul says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. And in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, which you can extinguish all flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God."
Yeah. So in this story, all these, it's kind of almost a rip off of like Clash of the Titans kind of thing here,
Yeah, a little bit.
a little bit. So he has all this armor that he's supposed to use along the way, where he oftentimes he lays it down and isn't with it in one scene, and then
Leaves
like
parts
two
of
or
it.
three scenes later, it shows back up.
Or yeah, he'll just leave it somewhere and then it's just gone.
Yeah,
There's that's happened also a couple times.
yeah,
And of all of this pieces of armor, too much leg.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Talk about some Achilles heel there, but, um, but in this, from the Christian perspective, we have our own Lord of Darkness, and uh, he will use a wide variety of attacks. And that's where this passage that Paul's talking
Yeah.
about. That this armor that comes from God. Each one of these pieces represents something else, and each one of those things is essential in the fight that we have against our enemy. And I know we don't really like, as a at least in America, we don't really like talking about Satan all that much.
Yeah.
We definitely don't like talking about the actual spiritual attacks because it's hard for us to really wrap our brains around.
Yeah.
But we can't deny that it happens. It
Yeah.
just doesn't often happen.
Hollywood's kind of
Yeah,
fantasized it, so
yeah,
it's hard to recognize.
yeah. But there are attacks, and read this passage again from Ephesians.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're under the attack of, whether it's a literal physical attack from Satan, or if it's something more along the lines of just dealing with temptation or dealing with um, just a sense of pride or arrogance, or even maybe you're at the point where you say, "Well, this is all kind of stupid and none of this matters." That's those times where we're supposed to put on all this armor to help battle those feelings of um, unforgiveness or
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be.
And each part's important too because
Yeah,
they help you fight different battles.
yeah, yeah, and they all need to be worn, because uh, if you just put your helmet on, you leave yourself a whole wide variety of attacks to other things.
Yeah.
Or the same thing if you just have your shield. Well, there's lots of other areas that
Yeah.
your shield's not protecting. That what Paul's talking about is all supposed to be worn as one set of armor,
Mm-hmm.
and that's who we're meant to be, is a people that are fully armored against those attacks. So,
Yeah.
did you have something else?
I was just gonna say, don't drop your armor like Jack.
Yeah, you might not have magical fairies to keep it up for you. Um, but then, in the midst of him going to get this armor, Lily and this last unicorn, the mare, are captured. The Lord of Darkness, when they get to his castle, which I think there was also reference to it being the first tree,
Yeah, that's the way they made it sound.
which I don't fully understand because it's definitely a castle.
Yeah,
But maybe it's a reference to like the first tree of creation.
I think that's what they were getting at, was that Satan's kind of made the Garden of Eden his own.
Dominion
Yeah,
is
that's where
dominion.
the first sin was committed. So
Yeah,
why not build my
yeah.
place here?
So he's in his castle and he wants Lily, not as a prisoner, not as just another sacrifice, but he wants to make Lily his sweetheart.
Yeah,
He wants Lily to be his own bride. But there's a problem. Her heart is too pure.
she's too innocent.
She's too innocent. So he has to find a way to make Lily one of them. You know, them being the Lord of Darkness and the goblins. So he puts things in her path, and in this movie, it is jewelry and fancy clothes and sweet things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Uh, she is soon intrigued by all these temptations. Um, she is then, after she's intrigued by the fancy clothes and the sweets and the jewelry, and she goes over to him, then there's this woman figure dressed all in black, can't see a face, and this figure's dancing and kind of luring her in, and she's being led away, and then she literally becomes, in this moment, as she begins dancing with the darkness, she becomes the darkness
Mm-hmm.
because she had submitted herself to it. She became what she never wanted to be, and it all started back with that original sin of touching the unicorn. And the Lord of Darkness tells her that she can fight it or she can't fight it because the seed of darkness, this is from the movie, you can't fight it because the seed of darkness is growing deep within you and will soon be consuming you. And that is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if that's not a biblical reference to the problem with sin, I don't know what is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some deep, you know, you can make some deep
Yeah,
theological points from this movie because at its core, no matter what the sin is, if you allow that sin to take root, it will become all consuming.
yeah.
It can be something as innocent as, you know, as baking. You know, I don't know why that came to mind, but,
Mm-hmm.
say you're a teenager and, you get a spark of, I like to bake because my grandma baked and we had a lot of fun. And then there's nothing wrong with baking. Baking's great. There's a lot of great bakers out there. But if you allow that baking to become more important than God, which we don't often vocalize something like baking becoming more important than God,
Yeah,
but we do it through our actions.
yeah.
And pretty soon, you become completely consumed by baking. There's a one of the judges slash hosts of um, MasterChef. Remember Christina, the
Mm-hmm.
blonde?
Yeah.
She was in an interview and she talked a little bit about that. That she became so consumed by being the best baker that she forgot her love of baking, and
Wow.
she forgot her love of why she started doing it in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning because she started baking with her grandma, and that was their connection and her
Mm-hmm.
fondest memories are being in the kitchen with grandma, and and I think that happens in a wide variety of ways through our life.
Yeah. There's this author. I can't remember what book it was. It was a book I was reading early in my ministry classes that talked about kind of that darkness seed
Hmm.
was sprouts this idolatry tree, this tree
Hmm.
of idolatry, and each sin we or each thing that we idolize
Mhm.
is a new branch. So
Mhm.
the more things that we're holding more powerful than God, the bigger that tree gets. And I
Mhm.
think it's kind of that same concept.
It
The
is,
more things that we're putting in front of God, the bigger that sin grows in us.
and it could be something that starts out as being totally innocent.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, something awful.
No.
It can be something innocent that I think of this. I've used this example before. My father-in-law, he's always been a lover of classic cars, hot rods. He decided he had never built a car from the ground up before, a full restoration. He'd done lots of work on cars, but he had never done the entire thing.
Hmm.
So he bought a Chevy C10. I think it was a '68, and that's what he did. He rebuilt this thing I think it took like a year and a half. Just doing it on the weekends and the evenings. But over the time, something that was an innocent hobby turned into an obsession.
Hmm.
So much so that he was even placing, and he would be the first to admit this, he was placing that in front of his family. His wife, my mother-in-law, um, needed a car to go to the grocery store, and it was raining, so she couldn't just ride her bike like she normally would. So she took Mike's prized hot rod out in the rain, which you just don't do,
Hmm.
because classic trucks have wooden beds, and you put a wooden bed out in the rain and you don't dry it off, then rot sets in and
Yeah.
rust and all kinds of stuff. So he talked to me specifically about the anger that he felt in that moment, and he said that was when he knew he had to get rid of it
Hmm.
because it had become all consuming. That truck had become his idol. That truck had become his golden calf. Something that was totally innocent
Hmm.
had now consumed him. It was that seed that was planted in, I really want to do this because
Yeah.
I've always wanted to.
Yeah.
And then it grew and grew and grew and grew until it was all consuming.
Yeah.
And there was no room for anything else.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, moving on with the story, Jack soon realizes that the only way that he can defeat the Lord of Darkness is with the light of the sun. So, eternal winter has come,
Hmm.
but there's still sunlight that hasn't gone out yet. But it's starting to fade because darkness is about to kill the mayor.
Yeah.
He actually says that we are going to bring light into all this darkness, and that is the only way to truly defeat evil. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, that's all we need from this movie.
yeah, that is biblical concept straight from Sermon on the
Yeah.
Mountain.
I think we both had a hard time coming up with parables, but man, that one just writes itself.
Yeah, it's so easy. We don't even need to explain that one.
No.
You know, the only way that we can defeat the darkness in our own personal lives,
Hmm.
the only way we can defeat darkness in the world is by bringing light. And that light is the love of God.
Hmm.
And you had one, right? On trust?
Yeah, I had a quick thing on trust where how this kind of happens in the beginning. We see it right at the end, uh, where Jack has put all of his trust into Lily and really wants to show her the unicorns. Like he just he wants to share this pure
Yeah,
light with her, and he trusts her to show that she won't touch the unicorns. That's his one rule,
yeah,
and she breaks his trust. She just
yeah,
outright does it to him. Looks him in the eyes. He's like, no. He like is begging her
yeah,
not to, and she does it anyways.
yeah,
And again, further down near the end of the movie, where she says she's going to be the one to execute the mayor,
mm,
and all the fairies are like, Jack, shoot her, like
mm,
she's going to kill him, and he says, no, I'm not going to, because I love her and I trust her, and I feel like
mm.
that's how God looks at
I
us.
think he even said no.
Yeah.
I know her, I love her, and I trust her.
Yes. And that, I mean, that's powerful. That
Yeah,
like that imagery, that is, I think that is how God looks at us. He's
yeah,
like, you've messed up, but I trust you, and
yeah.
I love you, and I
I
know,
know who you are.
yeah, I know you can make the right
Yeah,
decision.
yeah. No, it's great scene.
Yeah.
A horribly weird movie,
Yes.
but weird. It's a great. There's a
It,
couple of really
there's
great
some good
scenes.
redeeming
Yeah,
qualities right at the end.
yeah. And then right at the end, so now they've managed to, using all these giant silver plates that the giants were serving.
That are just really shiny.
Yeah, somehow they are perfectly shiny.
Yeah.
They managed to find a way to reflect light into this first tree or Darkness's castle,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. And Jack now has to fight the Lord of Darkness with not just the light, but with himself and his sword.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this scene where they're in this battle, and it looks like Darkness is going to win. And then Jack gives the best way. This is a great way for us to close this discussion.
Yeah.
And we'll just end on this. Is Jack drop kicks the devil. And when you are in a fight for all that really matters, when you're in a fight for whatever is going on in your life, whatever sin, whatever temptation, whatever really powerful thing is happening in your life, don't be afraid to drop kick the devil.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to close on today.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to leave it at that. That is all for this one.
Yeah.
It is a weird movie.
Very weird.
But if you want to watch something that you probably haven't seen, if you want to see a lot of Tom Cruise's legs, if you want to see Tim Curry as the devil, and find some of these little gems that are in there. And there's probably more that we just missed, but
yeah.
Probably not. I think we got most of them. It's worth watching. But next time, we're going to take a little break in our podcast schedule, kind of a mid-season break.
Yeah.
That will be coming up not this week, but the following week.
Yeah.
So we'll have one more of this coming out next week, and then we're going to take a couple-week break.
Yeah, we got a lot going on.
Yeah. We just need that a little bit of time, so we'll come back. But next week, we'll be here, and we're going to do a movie that was really underrated. It was...
Still is.
Yeah. It did not... Did it come out against something? Is that what happened?
Probably.
Was there another Disney movie that came out at the
It's
same
very
time?
possible that Frozen came out around the same time.
So the movie is called Rango.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Johnny Depp,
starring the voice of Johnny Depp and a couple other big names.
Yeah.
So watch that this week. I believe it's on Hulu. I think that's what you discovered.
I think so. It used to be on Netflix. Might be depending on where you live.
Yeah. So check out the streaming places. Watch Rango. If you have the DVD version, though, or maybe it's just the director's cut DVD version, there's an alternate version of this you can also watch, because Johnny Depp and some of the people that were in this were all method actors and didn't like the idea of just having their voices, so they actually act out this movie.
I have not seen this. I'll have to watch that too.
I have seen a 15-minute clip of it on YouTube.
That's amazing.
Johnny Depp is dressed as Rango.
It's Rango.
And the other people are, like the sheriff is wearing the hat and the vest. But they're just in a sound studio. They're not there's not backgrounds or anything like that. They're just doing this in character.
That's amazing.
And instead of, most of the time when you have these animated movies, it's just one person recording their lines in a studio by themselves. But this is the full cast recording on a sound studio because they wanted it to be more real and authentic. So please check out Rango before our podcast next week. It is truly a hilarious movie.
Yeah, good Western.
Yeah. If you're a Western fan and you got a young person in your life, it's a good thing to watch with that person or just watch for your own enjoyment.
Yeah.
But we look forward to it. But for now, thank you for joining us. We have been Graham and Devin from the La Mesa Church of Christ here at Real Parables, and we can't wait to talk to you again soon.